So welcome back, everyone. We're here for another week of Joint School, and again with Pete Robinson from Movement and Posture. Well, Merry Christmas, everyone. Of course, we will say, we are very committed to Joint School, but this particular session has been pre-recorded for your viewing pleasure. And hopefully we'll be having a nice meal with our families or something like that while this is going out. Well, small families or sort of over virtual means and so on. So it's a bit different this year. But anyway, enough about that. But today we will again be learning more about the Alexander technique. And thank you again, Pete, for an excellent introduction to that last week. And we then sort of carried on and spoke a bit more specifically about applying this approach to managing knee pain, and specifically knee pain arising from arthritis. And as we are very much focusing on sort of gathering together useful tools for people who are either awaiting or recovering from knee replacements or hip replacements, it then follows that we will do a session on using similar approaches, or rather applying the same Alexander technique, but to hip pain. So here we are.
Do you want me to take it away?
Yeah. I mean, I guess in this sense, as I understand it, at least in terms of managing knee pain, you have a fair amount of personal experience to draw on. But I guess that might not be the case with hip pain necessarily, or hip arthritis. But how would you say they are different in terms of applying the Alexander technique to managing problems with a hip versus problems with a knee?
I guess, the first thing is, as I mentioned last session, that we always look at the body as a whole. So if somebody comes in and says, I've got hip arthritis, we would start from the point of looking at the way that they're balancing and their kind of habits in the total use of themselves. Specifically with the hips, we do look at those in a different way than the knees, because we're looking at different movements and things like that. We're really looking at the way that the legs are interacting with the body. That's our kind of real focus with the hips. And we find that people, almost everyone, has developed unhelpful habits in the way that they use their legs in relationship to the body. I mentioned last week about that we're really concerned with length in the joints, in the muscles, of the legs. And that really carries on with the hips, that we're looking at the way that the knees are releasing away, keeping length from the hip joint. So the knees and hips are really looked at together a lot of the time with Alexander technique.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense. And so I guess then what would be the starting point for exploring using the Alexander technique to help someone with severe hip pain?
Yeah, I suppose the first thing is that we're trying to increase body awareness, increase awareness of what's actually going on. And then we're looking at our reaction to what we might notice is going on. So it's very common with people with any kind of pain condition that they're reacting to the pain in a way that's contracting and stiffening, which is a very natural reaction. But when it becomes chronic, when it's carried on over a long period of time, it can start to have knock-on effects in other parts of the body. So because the hips are so central to us, if I'll move the camera down a bit so I can see my hips. So if we're experiencing pain in the hip joints, then we find that we're pulling everything in towards the hip joints, and that can cause real problems. Because as you can probably see, that if my hips are tight and I'm pulling in towards it, the problem here is that my head is now out of balance. So rather than the weight of the head being transmitted down the spine through the legs, now we've got the problem that the head is still being pushed down by gravity, and the muscles in the back and neck and shoulders are having to really fight to hold that up, which will increase general stiffness in the body, which again has a knock-on effect in the hips. So I think we mentioned last week that we're not claiming that to be able to cure arthritis, but we're looking at what's going on around the joint with the arthritic changes and how we're responding to that arthritis.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess that's worth flagging again, that as with so many of these techniques, there is no cure as such for arthritis, but it's about finding the many different things that will come together to form a successful management approach for you, and perhaps the Alexander technique can be one of those avenues among many others.
Absolutely, yeah. And I always try to promote people that come to me with these kind of problems to really look widely at the issue. We find that addressing the psychological aspects, the dietary, the medicinal, there's such a huge range of self-care and well-being and health type of things that we need to look at, really.
Yeah. And I've been thinking a good deal about the Alexander technique and what you're saying about, well, really how mindful is it? Sort of mindful movement, really, is how one might summarize it.
Yeah, definitely. I mentioned in the last session last week that as I learned Alexander technique, movements became more pleasurable, more pleasant to make. I suffered a lot with repetitive strain injury and sort of nerve issues into my arms. And I found that by really working on those and getting to the point where I could make arm movements that weren't based on my old habits of stiffening and tightening, suddenly I realized that moving my arms felt really nice rather than being associated with discomfort and pain. And the same with the legs. With the knee arthritis I had, I think I developed a fairly toxic relationship with my knees. And the Alexander technique helped me to break that down and sort of rebuild the relationship, if you like, with my legs. So that I found I probably don't move the same way that I did before I had the arthritis. But the movements that I make now are much more conscious and much more balanced and free than they used to be. So yeah, you get it's mindfulness applied to the body, but with the idea that we're trying to make things better. We're trying to get rid of anything that's unpleasant or unhelpful in there.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And in your experience of helping people who with hip pain, I guess we talked in the previous episode about finding new habits, and of course that can take time, but there may be some reasonably quick improvements that can be achieved as well, depending, and this will vary from person to person and the underlying problems and what kind of things you can find. But particularly with hip pain, what is there? I guess we're not looking for sort of a quick win, but again, what sort of is where would one begin, and what are the sort of the next steps beyond that?
There are many starting places you can come from, and a lot of the choice of starting place for me, if I'm working with someone individually, will be the severity of their condition and also other conditions that they may have around that. So somebody that's finding it difficult to stand or difficult to sit would be approached in different ways. If people are unable to move very much at all, very restricted, then we also use a kind of treatment table, couch type thing, and we can work with people in that way. But if we take somebody that's able to still move around but is experiencing a lot of pain, then one thing we would focus on is trying to develop some awareness of how the legs work as a whole. So an easy thing would be to look at how they move in and out of a chair. This is a classic Alexander technique sort of teaching tool. We find that the natural coordination of the legs that we're all born with, if you look at young children, you can see that they move in this way, is that the legs are designed to fold up under the body. And we're designed to move in a way that doesn't cause compression across the joints of the legs. So humans aren't designed to sit on chairs at all. Chairs are very artificial. We're designed to stand. We're really good at standing. And we're designed to squat. So if I can adjust this camera angle, sorry.
Yeah.
So if I'm, move this chair out of the way. So I know you can't see my head now, but if I was going to move downwards in space, what I'm looking to do is to let my knees go forwards, my hips go backwards, and my ankles stay backwards. And what I get is I can move down in space until I go into a deep squat. This hasn't affected my spine. My spine is still able to maintain its shape, and there's very little compression on the joints. People in sort of more traditional cultures around the world use that squatting position extensively. People working in fields. When I go to China to visit my relatives there, I find that people will still drop into a squat and chat, and that's just a natural position for them. And we've really lost that in the West. So trying to reclaim some of that coordinated use of the body, of the legs with the body, is really helpful. So one thing you could do would be to look at how you stand up out of a chair. Might be a good example. So if I zoom down, so we've got a bit of a chair in the shop.
Yeah.
So somebody with arthritic changes in their hips are going to really struggle to make the movement out of a chair, particularly as a lot of people are moving out of a chair in a way that's causing compression on that joint. So a lot of people, if you see them trying to get up, they'll do something like this. There'll be a kind of a pushing up. So they're crunching themselves down and then sort of shoving their knees back into their body in a hope that they'll come out of the chair, which works fine if you're healthy and young, but we associate kind of older people with this inability to get out of a chair. Whereas if we kind of stick to that more natural coordination of the legs, where I want my knees to be releasing away from my back the whole time, so that there's length and freedom in the hip joint and the knee joint, then all I really want to do is to bring my head in balance over my feet and then bring my head upwards. And it's sort of a fundamentally different approach to that movement. And we find that most people have developed a real habit of crunching to try to move. And by allowing a movement to happen through natural shifts of balance and avoiding that tension, that can have a real immediate effect on people's experience of hip pain that I've found.
Yeah. And I guess that's also goes hand in hand with what you said in the knee episode about sort of leading with the head almost, that in that seated position is very like the head kind of almost moves first in a sense.
Absolutely, yeah. The way that vertebrates work, any animal, is that the head leads the neck or the spine. You can see this much more clearly in four-legged animals. So if you look at the cat, its head will catch sight of a bird and the eyes will swivel, the head will swivel, and then the whole cat aligns along that gaze and moves in that way. And that real natural, graceful movement that you see in animals such as cats, horses, is the same way that we work. But because we're upright, our head is leading us upwards. So the response to gravity in my body is led by the head taking me upwards. And if we're leaving that alone, if we're allowing that to be natural, then that's what creates the lightness and freedom and the range of movement in the body. We tend to find that people have a habit of poking the neck forwards, pulling down in the body, crunching the head backwards on the neck. So that's kind of a more of a human habitual posture. And that's the key, what Alexander called the primary control of what's going on in the rest of our body. So often somebody with experiencing a lot of hip problems will benefit greatly from developing back to a more natural balance of the head on the neck and the spine. So yeah, that's the real key to it, I think.
Okay, interesting. So it seems that with the Alexander technique, there's an opportunity to perhaps get a little bit closer to the elegance of cats and horses, and indeed, I guess, movie stars and musicians who've been using this approach quite a lot for some time.
Absolutely. We're trying to return ourselves to the use of the body, the gracefulness that we're born with. I've got two young daughters, and if I look at them, they're 3 and 5 at the moment. And if I watch the way they move, they're incredibly graceful. They move in balance the whole time. They'll never strain against something. So if you gave me something heavy, I will strain not to drop it. If I gave my MacBook to my 3-year-old daughter, she would just drop it on the floor. So there's that natural kind of grace and movement that we're born with, and we gradually throw it away as we go to school and
become. That being said, we're not recommending smashing MacBooks.
Do not smash that. No, definitely not.
Interesting. Well, hey, Pete, I think that's been another lovely sort of general overview of what Alexander technique and perhaps more what it can offer to help manage hip pain. But of course, as with anything, it's going to be finding many different methods, many different approaches to manage each individual's pain, but also everything really is best when it's personalized, whatever it is, be that a pain management plan, advice around Alexander technique, and so on. So, if this feels like something that you'd want to know more about, certainly contact Pete, or find someone who can advise you perhaps closer to home as well. But certainly there'll be details below this video for movementimposture.com and the Facebook group, where you can get in touch with Pete for more of a personalized consultation around how you can use the Alexander technique to manage your personal situation. Is there anything else you'd like to add, Pete, before we sign off and say wish everyone a Merry Christmas and a good end to the year?
No, I think as I mentioned last time, basically don't give up hope. We're fortunate today that there are such a wide range of disciplines, all offering different approaches to the problems that you may be facing. Listen to everything and find out what appeals to you. For me, when I heard about Alexander technique, is when I found about meditation or some of the other things that I've enjoyed in my life. It resonated with me, and I liked that way of working. So yeah, there's not one way for anyone. Just find what feels like your approach, I guess.
Yeah. Well, absolutely. Well, all the best to everyone out there in terms of, we wish you the best of luck with finding your approach or adding new techniques to whatever you're combining to make things a bit more manageable for you. I wish you and your family and everyone all the very best for the end of the year and into 2021. All right, take care of everyone, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye then.